be able to work with Jim Englebrecht. Jim is a member here at the museum. He's one of our volunteers, and he has become quite an avid studier of the Turnbull settlement since I first met him here in the museum, just walking through, taking notes, and learning everything that he could. But Jim actually grew up in Cincinnati, went to college in New York, and ended up working for Parker Brothers Games in Salem, Massachusetts, in graphic design and photography work. He eventually moved to Boston, is where he was living when he found his way to New Smyrna Beach. And that's where the story turns familiar, because it's a lot of our stories. We got here, we fell in love with this place, they kept coming back and snowbirding, and eventually got the opportunity to move here like a lot of us did. He's been in the area now for, in and out of the area for about 12 years. He's a Florida master naturalist, and is a kayak guide for the Marine Discovery Center, and is an avid follower of history. Please help me in welcoming Jim Englebrecht.
Thank you very much. Or Dr. Andrew Turnbull, whichever you prefer, okay? So we're going to talk a little bit about a very specific time period in the New Smyrna Settlement. A little while ago there was a presentation about a section of time before what I'm going to talk about, when Andrew Turnbull came here and explored the area and picked out the location for the settlement, okay? Once he had done that, he now needs to go and recruit the settlers, okay? Now, Dr. Andrew Turnbull had been in the consular service with the British government, and that's how he ended up originally in Smyrna. And if nobody knows where Smyrna is, Smyrna's right up here on the coast of what is today Turkey, but this was the Turkish Ottoman Empire, okay? And so he was there. That's where he met his wife, got married, had his first set of children, and then he said once Florida became part of the British Empire as a colony, we were the 14th and 15th colony in the United States. A lot of people don't realize that. They don't teach that in school, but East Florida and West Florida. But it was very undeveloped. The Spanish had been here for 250 years and really didn't do much other than use it as a military post. So Dr. Turnbull found out that the British government was giving away land. And so he turned to his wife and said, "Honey, you want to move to Florida?" So that's how a lot of people ended up here. So this is the Travelocity map of 1730. Andrew Turnbull would have been familiar with this map, again, because he spent time in the Mediterranean. And I just sort of brought this up because it's kind of interesting. It's an early map, and I just want to show you a couple things on here before we get to the presentation. So if you go here in Algeria, you notice that Algeria, this country is famous for lions, ostriches, porcupines, and wild boars, chameleons, leopards, and apes, etc., and furnished caves for a vast number of wild beasts, and is inhabited by people that wander up and down with their tents. So this was a way of people that were either familiar with the area or people that just wanted to sort of learn about geography. They could find and learn about what was happening in the world. And here's Smyrna on the west coast of what is today Turkey. So if we then go forward a little bit, this is a map that we will use in the presentation. This is a British naval map, Horatio Nelson of the Nile, okay, Admiral Horatio Nelson. So this was a British navigational map of the current time that we're talking about, and would have been used by the captains on the boats that Andrew Turnbull was on as he traveled. So we're going to use this map as we go through. So I just wanted to quickly bring that up before we go to the presentation, which is right here, the Smyrna Settlement. I just want to quickly say I've done a lot of research and reading, and so I just wanted to give you a little bit of idea. This is a book that was written in about 1919 by Carita Dodgett. She was a third great-grandchild of Andrew Turnbull. She wrote this as a college thesis. It's a very good book. This is in our library, in our gift shop. This is Mullet on the Beach, which is a lot about the Menorcans in St. Augustine, and gives sort of their perspective. This is a book that's, I think we have one copy left of this book in the gift shop. This is an excellent book. It was written as a Spanish thesis about the Menorcan culture, and he was studying how the Menorcan culture survived in St. Augustine. But he goes a lot into the history of the New Smyrna Settlement, and actually talks a lot about the indentured contract. So that's in our gift shop. This is a great DVD on sale in our gift shop. A great DVD that gives an overview about New Smyrna and the archaeology and such. And then this is a book I just found online, out of print, Menorcans in Florida. So I'm looking forward to reading this. And a lot of the letters that I'm going to be talking about are online at the University of North Florida. You can go to their website and read all these letters back and forth. It's very interesting. Just quickly on this slide here, these are actual documents from the Turnbull settlement that were found in the Duncan archives in Scotland at the about 2003, 2002. They actually, when they found these documents, they had no idea where New Smyrna was. You know, it said East Florida, but Florida, they say, was a term that the British kind of used for their garden estates, because Florida being a Spanish word for, you know, anything gardens and flower related. They didn't realize this was an actual settlement, but they finally figured it out, and we've gotten a wealth of information from this. So I brought my book, okay, with all my information that we will talk about. So let's get going. This is an early map when Florida became a British settlement, a British colony in 1763, at the end of the 7 Years' War. The British government sent people to sort of survey and to create information to encourage people to come and create settlements in Florida. This was a map done by Dr. Stork in association with John Bartram, who came to Florida as a naturalist. The British government paid him. He was from Philadelphia. And he did a trip down the St. Johns River and into East Florida to sort of say, what do we own now? And to sort of encourage people to come and settle. So this is 1763. Down here, Mosquito Inlet. Okay, obviously New Smyrna's not here yet. Cape Canaveral here. The Matanzas Inlet, St. Augustine, and then the mouth of the St. Johns River. So this is something Dr. Turnbull would have seen. So I'm going to jump ahead to a future map, even though this map did not exist yet, but this is a map from like 1776, done by John Bartram. I'm sorry, by Bernard Romans, okay, did this map. And he actually is a name that comes up a lot. He wrote a whole book about East and West Florida, and he was did a lot of map making. So again, Mosquito Inlet or New Smyrna entrance. So New Smyrna's here. Mount Tucker. Mount Tucker is Turtle Mound. Okay, Turtle Mound was a very specific navigational aid. So this name on Florida maps will change 4 or 5 times throughout all the different maps that you look at. St. Augustine, and then this map goes all the way up to 13 colonies, but I cut it off at Charlestown at the top. But during Turnbull's time period, Charleston was called Charlestown, South Carolina, and this is a picture of the harbor with ships of the time. So he finished figuring out where he wanted his settlement to be, and he travels back up to St. Augustine, and then travels from St. Augustine to Charlestown, because at that time, to travel back and forth to England, you sort of had to go where the major shipping was happening back and forth, and Charlestown was sort of the major port for supplies coming and going between the colonies and England. And so he would travel up there to find a ship, the next ship that's traveling, okay? You didn't go online and book a ticket. You sort of went to the port, and it's like, okay, what ship is here and who has room for me to go? So he takes some time. This is January 1767, and he's in town. He's also at this time, before he gets on the boat, he's writing letters back to Governor Grant in St. Augustine saying, I'm on my way to get the settlers. I want you to get things ready because I'm bringing 500 people back, and I want to order supplies because I'm going to be back within the year, okay? So I want to make sure I've ordered cows, and I've hired people to come and start building housing, and I want to start getting all this ready. And he was ordering food. Now at that time, food was dried and salted and put in barrels to be preserved, but he was thinking, okay, I got to be ready for when I get back. So he was having food sent down. So he gets on the ship and he travels to London, and he gets into London in March of 1767. So that's about an 8-week. And again, all of these dates are based on the letters that are written. Okay, so he gets to London and he writes a letter back to Governor Grant. Takes that letter gets put on a ship and sent back. So that's going to be another 8-10 weeks or whatever for that letter to get back. So mail going back and forth, was quite slow, the correspondence. So what's interesting here, he gets into London and he spends time organizing, talking to his investors, talking to the government, because the government had put aside money as a bounty or, to encourage people to come and start a settlement, and Dr. Turnbull wanted to take advantage of that. So the government gave him £1,000 towards starting the settlement, and £100 because they knew he was going to recruit Greeks for the settlement. They gave him £100 for a Greek priest. Okay? Now the other thing, before in 1763, and now when he's in London, he spends time at the Shakespeare Head pub. And it's still there in London. And this was the center of activity for the East Florida Society. And this was like 40 very well-respected individuals with money that were interested in the possibility of getting land grants. They would come and meet over beer, and they would talk about getting land grants and how do I set up a settlement and all this. So this was a very important group of people. So he's coming back and he does a presentation to the East Florida Society about his plans and how far he's gotten along. And they comment that he's quite an enthusiastic and optimistic individual. And actually, one person writes in a letter, saying, there's some problems going on, but Dr. Turnbull, I hate to dissuade him of his golden dreams. So that sort of gives you an idea that this is the guy that's like really excited, let's get this done. So he travels from London and heads down to Marseille. Originally, people thought he left London and sailed around Gibraltar and into Minorca. But his letters, he wrote a letter in Paris and he wrote a letter in Marseille. He had traveled down overland and then on a riverboat down to Marseille, and again, being very enthusiastic, they were going to grow indigo, and he says, yeah, but we can also do vineyards. And look at all these great vineyards. We can do vineyards in Florida. We can make wine. this is going to be great. So he's looking at all this, and in his letters, he says, you know what? I'm going to recruit some 5 French fellows that are expert in winemaking and have them come to Florida also. So he's getting all these wild ideas and gets on a packet boat now from Marseille down to Mahon in Minorca, which he gets there May 26, 1767, and that at that time Minorca was a British territory. Okay, so that's why he picked it as his spot of organization and sort of his jumping off point, because it had a fabulous harbor. And that harbor, here's Minorca here, okay, and at this point he had no real intentions of recruiting Minorcans for this venture. There had been several pamphlets written ahead of time by other people saying the Greeks would be fabulous for working in Florida. This was not his idea alone. Several other people had these ideas. So he was like, I'm going to recruit Greeks to bring to New Smyrna. And so this just happened to be the point of jumping off, his point of operation. And it had a deep harbor here. This is the Mahon Harbor. And again, it was a hubbub of activity with all sorts of British and Dutch merchant ships and the British Navy. And so this was the perfect place to sort of set up operation. He decides at that point he's going to leave Mahon and he's going to travel to Leghorn. And he gets to Leghorn and writes a letter June 7th, 1767. So I hope people are keeping track of how long this is taking, okay? It took me a while to figure out Leghorn. You know, he went to Leghorn. Where the heck is Leghorn? You know, and I knew it was Italy, and until I found this map, which had the harbor and fort in Leghorn, and then Leghorn is listed up there. It's Livorno, Italy, okay? Now, here's an interesting side point. Leghorn was famous for poultry.
Foghorn Leghorn.
You got it! You got it! That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that was on Jeopardy the other night, by the way. So he's here, and he has to, you know, the reason he was like deciding to go to Italy, again, I saw all these vineyards. Italians are great at making wine. I'm going to go recruit Italians. Now he knew that a lot of the local government and the local governors and political establishments would be very protective of their citizens, because their citizens worked the land and then paid you know, their taxes and their percentage of their, you know, to the government. So he sort of was like, okay, I'm going to collect people that are sort of on the fringe. And he knew in Leghorn, because again, there was a British consular person he knew in Leghorn, and there were a lot of Italians that had come from other places in Italy and sort of ended up in Leghorn, but that weren't local citizens, and sort of became, you know, refugees. And what do we do with these people? And he knew the government would be more than willing for him to recruit those people. So he recruited 110 people over several days, collecting these people to go back to Mahon. But he also ran into some problems and knew that, okay, he had to finish what he was doing and get out of there, because you know, there might be some issue about, you know, you're taking people you shouldn't be taking. But again, these were people that he thought were particularly fine for the vineyard, you know, to work in the vineyards. Again, he's sort of getting sidetracked as to what the settlement's going to be. And I just want to show this because during his trips, he was very meticulous about keeping records and accounts, because he had investors. So every time he had a bill to pay, he had to reconcile and write it down, but he also would be writing in his letters, oh, by the way, Sir Duncan, I am drawing another £1,000 from the account to pay for XYZ. So these are, day by day, everything that he's buying, pounds, shillings, pence, as far as the expenses of recruiting people, paying for their provisions. He was buying clothing to bring with these 110 people because he was bringing them back to Minorca to wait while he went off to recruit more people. So again, the British pound equaled 20 shillings. 1 shilling was 12 pence. Okay, so in reading these accounts, if you wanted to try and figure out how much money is he spending, okay, you sort of have to do that math. And 1 pound in 1767 is equal to 185 pounds today. Okay, so if he was paying £3 and 19 shillings for provisions on the 19th, okay, for people, you would multiply, and 19 shillings is almost a pound, so four times $185, that's what he was paying for that one line item, okay? So and we have all his ledger books, and so it's fascinating to go through them. The other thing is, it was a long trip back to Mahone, so for the settlers on board for entertainment, he buys them a drum and a fiddle so they could entertain themselves while they were on the ship. Okay? So it's all kind of interesting. So he leaves Leghorn, comes back to Mahone, July 5th, 1767, and drops them off. Okay? And he says, okay, I'm going off to recruit the Greeks now, so I'm going to leave you all here. And so he has to start paying for them to be room and board in Mahone. Okay? Now, as we get into the story, think about what's going to happen over the next couple of months. You take 110 Italian men and you drop them off, what's going to happen? Okay, think about that. Okay? Think about that.
And they're getting paid.
Yeah. And so he's having to pay for room and board and expenses and clothing and everything for those 110 people. Okay? At this time, he's writing back and forth to his main investor, Sir William Duncan, saying, here's the contract I'm doing for all these people I'm recruiting. Okay? They're going to be indentured servants. And so what that means is I'm going to pay for your room and board, I'm going to pay for your provisions, I'm going to buy clothing, I'm going to have you work in New Smyrna, but you need to work to pay off that debt. And then once that debt is paid off, then the next part of the contract will kick in. Well, he writes back and forth several times over the years about the indentured contracts, and then a copy of a contract was found in the Mahone archives in Minorca that sort of outlined, and it's been a point of contention over the years as to what contract there was he being fair? Some people accused him of forging their names on the contract. I never signed that. But originally it was going to be 6 years indentured, and then you would run in a lease program on the farm, and you would share profits between the Turnbull settlement investors and the farmer would share those profits. But it also says in the contract, because that was a point of contention at the end when the settlement failed, people said, I worked 6 years and I still didn't get out of the contract. Well, the contract actually states that the years of indentured servitude do not start until what he called the first sharing. And so what did that mean? the first sharing meant you owe as a group, and it's amazing because the debt got higher and higher and higher. He was actually adamant, though, not to charge interest, and he told his investors, they have to pay off the debt, but we're not going to charge them interest. But the debt got higher and higher every year, and so the first sharing would be at the point that the profits of the settlement would be paid off by the indigo that was produced or any other produce. And once the debt was paid off, then the clock starts. So he, in his mind, thought, it's going to take us 3 years to pay off the debt. And then he started at 6 years, but then got people to agree to 10 years. So he said, the settlers will be here for 13 years. Then they'll go into a lease agreement and then be released eventually from their indentured contract. But that was a big controversy. So he finally leaves Malta and gets to Smyrna in August of 24th, 1767. And his idea here is, again, to recruit people, because Smyrna was a Greek settlement. But again, he ran into problems with the local government. Is like, you're not taking our people. So he used that as an opportunity to reassess and to outfit his boats. And he was able to recruit some people. At this time, he ends up with about 2 boats. He started on a single boat, and then he had to fit out a boat in Smyrna and hire it to continue. And the local government was sort of getting suspicious, so he was like, I got to get out of here, okay? So here, he's leaving Smyrna, and again, weather's not that great, and he ends up in Milo, September 30th. Again, because of weather, he wanted to get into safe harbor. And just to give you an idea of boats, okay? So he's sailing, and we know that they were using brigs and schooners and a boat called, a type of boat called snow, okay? It was a style of boat, which is about the same size as a brig. So here's a man of war, military boat that would have 400 to 600 sailors, okay? That's a pretty big boat, multiple decks. Here's a frigate, and then here's the size boats between the brig and the schooner that Dr. Turnbull was using, okay? Not a lot of room, not a lot of room, okay? He again leaves Milo because he had been concerned about being able to get 500 people, okay? I don't think I'm going to get 500 people, I don't know. And he's sending messages around to all these different consular people that he knows in the area, saying, I gotta get people to recruit. And so he's told to come to Morea, which is the southern Peloponnese peninsula of Greece. Sparta would be up here, okay? And then there was a river that came down to here. And he was going to recruit 200 Greek families, okay? 200 Greeks. And so he starts doing that, and then he finds out that some of the Greeks, there's a plague, so he's like really freaked out. I don't want to bring sick people onto the boat. So he sort of arranges, and all these different places he's arranging. Oh, by the way, if you find anybody that wants to come to Florida, send them my way. I'll be in Mahone, okay? So he's recruiting some people and decides to leave here. But again, the weather is bad, and he ends up in Sergio. And again, here Sergio is spelled different, and he spells it this way. And then you look at a modern map, and then it's something different. So that was a problem, trying to figure out where are all these places he's going. So he ends up in Sergio, and again, this is just because of bad weather. Okay, we're now in November 23, 1767. He had told Governor Grant, I'll be home by Christmas. Okay, don't you worry, with 500 people, get everything ready in New Smyrna, he's still here, okay? So they leave here, but again, everywhere he's going, he's telling people, I don't think I can get 500 people. If you find people that are interested, send them my way, okay? And he runs into the worst weather ever, okay? I mean, this has been months in the Mediterranean. Can you imagine? It must have been horrible, a horrible experience. So he leaves Sergio, and because of the bad weather, he's sort of jumping from port to port to port. In his letters, he talks about stopping at 7 different ports along this bay until he gets here, okay? And this is where things even go from bad to worse, okay? He ends up in Methone, and this is Fort Modone, with a very strict governor who had sort of heard tell of what Andrew Turnbull was doing. Turnbull had been warned also. So it's interesting, at one point in time, Dr. Turnbull has his books and ledgers of all his accounts and all the information, and he's like, oh my gosh, you know, this is gonna be kind of iffy. He writes a digest of what his expenses and accounts are, and he folds it all up and he sticks it in the lining of his hat, because it's like, if things go bad here, I don't want to lose all my records, okay? So they land here. They are on the verge of running out of water and supplies, so they put 10 men in a boat and they send them ashore to get water. The governor arrests the 10 men and throws them into jail. And so Turnbull has to go ashore and meet with the governor and sort of like plead sort of innocence. You know, I'm not taking any of your people. We're doing, you know, he gives this whole big story and sort of comes to an agreement over tea with the governor to be let go. But in order to be let go, he has to agree to allow some soldiers to come aboard the ships and inspect the ships, and he has to bribe everyone. So he pays off the governor, he pays off the soldiers, and in his books, in his accounts to his investors, he had to pay a bribe of 102 pounds and 6 shillings. In today's money, today, that would have been $23,000. So the soldiers come on board, they get their bribe, they leave, and now he can leave, okay? So,
Not much has changed.
Yeah, it says.
I know. And it's a little unclear. It's a little unclear how many people are on his boats at this time, traveling. We know that 200 Greeks are coming in another boat that are being sent to Mahone. But again, trying to figure out exactly how many people he's recruited is a little difficult to figure out. So he leaves Methone, gets to Malta. Again, the weather's terrible, and leaving Malta, he wants to get all the way back over here to Mahone. But the wind is blowing in this direction from the west to the east, and in a square-rigged boat, you can't sail into the wind. You have to tack, okay? And so he decides, instead of tacking back and forth, and again, the wind is coming this way, so he's going here, which is fine, but he would have to get up here and then turn to come down this way, but this island's in the way. So he decides, we're going to go from Malta to Palermo, and then Palermo to Leghorn, and his ships are in pretty bad shape, so he writes that he needs to have repair done to the ships, okay? We're now January 1768. He's been over 3 months leaving Smyrna to get to Leghorn, okay? And again, he's spending hand over fist, all this money, provisions, and supplies to keep this venture going, okay? So he leaves Leghorn and then gets back down to Mahone February 3rd, 1768. By this time he's written Governor Grant saying, you know what, I don't think I'll be home by Christmas, okay? You know, things are running a little behind. So he gets back to Minorca, okay? And he gets back to Minorca and starts figuring out how many people do I have. And he's in Minorca. This is the port of Minorca, of Mahone, that safe harbor. Here's a typical boat. These are people that he starts then loading onto the ship. And you can see down below, there's not a lot of room. It's not first class by any means. You don't have cabins. It's just an open deck. Up top, it's not too bad. Fresh air, and actually, the goats and the chickens have a little better accommodation. He did have goats and chicken, and as he traveled, he was also collecting plants to have on the boat to bring back to New Smyrna. So he was bringing cuttings of grapevines, cuttings of olive trees, cuttings of mulberry trees. That was his other great idea. Mulberry trees. Why would you plant mulberry trees? Silkworms. We're going to bring silkworms. We're going to start a silk industry, okay? So he was full of ideas, okay? So he starts loading the boats and figuring out what to do next, okay? So again, here are the boats, typical size. There's a cutaway, so you have top deck, you have a middle deck, which is where you would have the people and the living quarters, and then the bottom would be ballast and all of your supplies, okay? Not a lot of space. And again, this is how you would travel. You would just be on an open deck, and you would just spend your day with whatever entertainment you could do. So he's starting to fill the boats. And let me go back. He starts bringing the Italians back on board. By this time, they have
Girlfriends.
and wives. They've gotten married. Some of them have kids. Okay, so now you've got this large group of people. You have the 200 Greeks that are traveling on another ship showing up. You have other people in Minorca hearing tales of this trip to East Florida. Well, Minorca was in a time of desperate droughts and famine for several years. So there were a lot of people that were like, there's got to be a better life. So they want to come along. So he writes, first off, he writes to the governor that he now had 500 people in Mahone, okay, and a ship with 200 Greeks is about to arrive, so that's going to bring me up to 700 people. Not soon after, he counts nearly 1,000 people he's got on his ships. And then he writes again, since he had left the first Italian recruits in Mahone over 8 months ago, many of them have married, have families. Now he has 1,200 people. He thought he wouldn't get the 500, okay? So this is costing a lot of money. And he has to outfit all these ships to get to Florida. But again, being very optimistic, if 500 was good, 1,200 is better, okay? Let's do it. So he's going gangbusters, hiring more ships to fill all these ships. And he's all excited that that there's now wives, because what do you want to do when you have a colony? You want that colony to expand, and so the wives, and again, this is a point of contention with a lot of people, because he writes, to Governor Grant, by the way, we have a goat on the ship that I think will be really a good breed for Florida. And by the way, the goat has had kids. And in the same sentence, and these Minorcan wives are doing just as good. They're good breeders. He uses the term, they're good breeders. We're gonna fill out the settlement. I've done genealogy, and all my family up until the 1900s were agriculturally based, and all of those families in my genealogy had 12, 14, 18 kids, because that's how you got work done on the farm. Okay, that was the norm. Okay, so he now needs to outfit the boats and figure out, how am I going to feed all these people while we travel from Mahone to East Florida? Okay, what am I going to feed these people? What have I been feeding the people while I've been in the Mediterranean? I found, this is a chart, and I have the full chart I can show you. This is the top part of the chart of what the daily or the weekly menu was for the British Navy in the 18th century. Okay, so you didn't get everything. It wasn't a smorgasbord. They were very specific of what you could eat on what day. The one thing you got every day, though, every day, every person got 1 pound of biscuits. Okay? And you might think, wow, biscuits, not bad. But again, you can pass these around. Here are the biscuits you're getting each day. Everybody gets 4 of these. So that's a 1/4 pound. You can pass those around. Now they had to be, biscuit is from, the etymology of the word biscuit is something that's twice baked, like biscotti. Okay? So you had to bake something and drive all the moisture out of it so that it wouldn't spoil. So those biscuits, and the word hardtack actually didn't come into use until the Civil War. So these were just called sea biscuits, like the racehorse, okay? And you got 1 pound of those every day for each person. And then as you got additional food that day, you would actually pulverize this any way you could and mix it in with anything liquid to soften it, okay? So at this time, the Navy, they got 1 gallon of beer a day, or 2 pints of wine, or a half a pint of brandy or rum, okay? Per person. So every day, you would be like, give me my half pint. This is a half pint, it says right here, half pint. And that's one of these, okay? On the British Navy ships, they had all these copper vessels of different sizes, from 1 gallon down to half a gill, okay? Being the smallest. And that's how things were measured out. And in 1740, Admiral Vernon, okay, was realizing, we're giving all these Navy guys a half a pint of rum a day, and look at how many accidents are happening on the ship. We have people falling down from the crow's nest. So Admiral Vernon in 1740 instituted grog. And that is a derogatory term that the Navy men gave it. Okay, the grog was watered down. They would take X amount of rum, mix it with water, and you got, instead of beer, you just got your gallon. You got your gallon of grog a day. Okay, so you were sort of spreading out how much alcohol they were drinking. It wasn't until 1790 that they realized citrus was key to curing scurvy. So lime juice was then added to grog, lime juice and sugar. But before that, your meals were all salted pork, salted beef, salted fish, biscuits, oatmeal. They would make what they call burgoo. And you would get dried peas, was sort of your vegetable. So I could show you more of this chart, but you could see you only got beef or pork or bacon on very specific days, okay? So it wasn't the greatest menu, okay?
I just want you to know Jim made these himself, okay?
I found the recipe. Not hard to make. They are hard, but they're not hard to make. So the other thing is the salted pork. All of this would be packed into barrels and sealed. Okay. Now, hopefully, by the time you open the barrel, okay, you hadn't sealed in with it any sort of weevils or bugs or anything, okay? Or your biscuits were 100% dry. If there was any moisture, they would start to deteriorate. And they talked about maggots would be something from flies. So like if a barrel was open, flies could lay eggs and you would get maggots. But you could get weevils that were like beetles in here. And again, protein. What can I say? But you would have to then prepare this for cooking. So just like salted fish, salted pork, you would take your daily ration out of here and soak it in barrels of water, okay, to get rid of the salt. But at that time then, all the excess fat and tallow and everything would sort of rise to the top, and they would scrape off what they called the slush, okay? They would save that slush, and sometimes that would get mixed in with their oatmeal. But then somebody thought that might be causing scurvy, so they stopped doing that. But the cooks saved the slush as they prepared the salted meats, and they would put it in barrels. They would come into port, and then local merchants would come to the wharf to buy the slush from the cook. If they were making candles or using it for other things, the fat content, and they would pay the cook for their barrels of slush. The cook would take his money and put it into the slush fund. And that was money that could be used to buy little luxury things that weren't in the budget. Okay, that's where that term comes from. So, interesting fact, okay? You're traveling from Minorca to East Florida. It's going to take us 12 weeks. I need a pound of biscuits per person, so that's 4 biscuits a day per person, okay? Times the length of the trip, times 1,403 people. How many biscuits do it? And he writes in his letter, I've hired every baker in Minorca to make biscuits over these months, okay? 628,000 biscuits to feed the people to cross the Atlantic. So where did people sleep? Okay? So they didn't just sleep on the floor. They slept in hammocks. But, you know, looking up above, you think that's not bad, but look down here. Each one of these is a hammock for all the people on this ship, 18 inches apart. Okay? So every night you would hang up your hammock, you would climb in. There was no room between you and the next person, like if you had to get up in the middle of the night. Okay? What if somebody had cholera or diphtheria or typhoid fever and they were sleeping 18 inches from you? Not a happy thing. That's one of the things in coming across the Atlantic is the rate of mortality was pretty high. Okay, they leave Mahone eventually. They're ready to go. They get to Gibraltar April 3rd, 1768. Weather's not good, so they're stuck in Gibraltar for a time. And he does another count, and instead of 1,200 people, he has 1,403 people. So he's like, well, hey, yeah, more biscuits. So eventually, the captain of the boat says, the captain signals ready to sail on April 18th. And they're going to now sail to Madeira, okay? And because he had all these people, he had 4 to 5 ships, then he had 7 ships for the voyage, and then when he gets to Madeira, 2 of the ships say, that's as far as we're going. So now he has to hire some other ships when he gets to Madeira, okay, on April 24th, and he hires some of the ships he already had. He had to hire 3 additional ships: Charming Betsy, Henry and Carolina, the Elizabeth, the Friendship, the New Fortune, Hope, American Soldier, and Betsy. And that's how many people were on each ship. 1,403 people. And again, the number of people per ship had to do with the size of the ship that they were on. Okay? And they leave Madeira and head to Florida, landing in St. Augustine on June 26th, 1768. Basically 6-7 months beyond the hoped schedule, okay? And the people in St. Augustine consider June 26th as landing day, okay? But if you read Turnbull's letters, that's the date Turnbull arrived in his ship with a couple of other ships. But these ships were spread out because they all traveled at different speeds. And so 3 ships had arrived several days earlier, and Turnbull says, I arrived on the 26th, and Governor Grant says, oh, by the way, 3 ships already arrived, 2 ships are already down in New Smyrna getting situated. 2 ships would get blown off course and later on land in Charleston and have to then make their way south. And then the Charming Betsy would arrive last. So the last people coming into New Smyrna was 3 days before the mutiny in August, which is a whole nother story we will do on another day. Okay? So that's the story, and here's the entire passage. The blue line's going to the east, and the red line's then heading back out to the west. And again, from the time he left Mahone to when he landed in St. Augustine, 12 weeks. 12 weeks. Any questions?
Great.
He was financing from investors.
Yes.
What was his financial,
So-
personal financial?
So he had 2 major investors, Sir William Duncan, and then Lord Grenville, who had been a prime minister, but he wanted to be sort of a silent partner. So there was another name of someone who sort of was the ghost. He was sort of the ghost investor, and he had a third party sort of working with Turnbull. And so they each agreed to invest £9,000 each. Okay? And Turnbull would be a third partner, quote unquote, for 9,000, but out of his 9,000 was deducted his wages, so to speak, for the fact that Turnbull was doing all the work. And then Turnbull would be managing the settlement. So he got credit against his investment. So at one point in time, Turnbull says he had invested £4,000 of his own, but it would never rise. Just to back up a little bit, he does say, by the time, looking at all his account books, by the time they get to St. Augustine, he had spent on this entire venture £14,917, while his investors only wanted to invest 18. But he kept saying, over the years, just a little more money, we can make it work, we can make it work, we can make it work. So that £14,900 today would be £2,759,737, or in he spent, just to do the recruiting, $3,311,685.
Wow.
How are the settlers going to pay this off?
Yeah.
Now, the one thing he did say, the settlers had to pay for all the provisions, all the accommodations, all the clothing, all the items he was buying, if they were buying equipment, buying anything. But he said, I'm not going to charge the settlers for the passage on the boats. So they got a little bit of relief there. But the money over the years would just keep mounting up and mounting up. And they actually say by the end of the 9 years, when the whole thing collapsed, 40,000 British pounds had been spent. Incredible. Anything? Oh, I'm sorry.
His personal assets, though,
Yes.
did he become wealthy?
No.
Or did
He lost
it all?
everything. He lost it all.
Okay.
In fact, his investors sued him. After everything was over, his investors actually sued him. And they actually got reparations from the British government in relationship to the fact that the Treaty of Paris in 1783, when Florida became Spanish again, all land had to be vacated by British subjects and turned over to the Spanish government. Well, as part of the treaty, the British government agreed to make reparations for any of the British investors that had been in Florida, but Turnbull, because he was being sued, never received anything.
Did he have to pay out anything?
No, I think he was bankrupt. He lost everything. He started a business. He actually moved to Charleston after the Revolutionary War and started a pharmacy and doctor. He was a physician, so he started a practice in Charleston. You had a question?
You said he was from Smyrna, was it in Western Turkey? Was Western Turkey now?
Yeah.
Was that a British colony at the time?
No, it was part of the Ottoman Empire, but all the years, even before the Ottomans, Smyrna had been basically occupied by people of Greek descent. Okay, so Smyrna's right here on the western coast of and Izmir, if you look on a map, Izmir, Turkey is where Smyrna, historic or archaeologically, where Smyrna was.
Was he English or?
He was English. His wife's family was of French descent that were also in the consular service for France, stationed in Smyrna. But she was born in Smyrna, okay, because that's where her parents were stationed, okay? And that's where they met. I think he was in his late 20s and she was in her late teens when they met.